Hi and welcome to Ask GMBN Tech, the weekly Q&A session. You ask us questions about mountain bike tech, use that hashtag Ask GMBN Tech, get involved in the comments underneath down there. Don't forget you can ask questions directly to myself as well, or any of the rest of the team here on GMBN, GMBN Tech, and of course EMBN. So hit us up in the comments down there. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so, and tell your friends about us. It's free content 4 times a week. Next up from Eddie Giamatillo. Can I put a 27.5-inch fork on a mullet frame designed to have a 27.5 in the back? So your frame, you say a Comcel Meta SX. So your bike's designed for 29 on the front. Well, technically, yes, you can just put that on there. But what you're going to have to take into account is the combination of the axle to crown height, the travel, and just the sheer difference in size of the front end. If you're to put the same equivalent travel fork on it and then put that front end on, your front end's going to be much lower, your head angle is going to be steeper, your handling is going to be all over the place, your BB is going to be lower. And also your bike, by putting that smaller front wheel on, will have the illusion of being bigger, just because your front wheel is going to be further away from your feet, but your axle will technically still be in the same place, as long as the offset is kind of similar between the forks there. So yes, you can do it. I've never gone that way before, but I have when the whole mullet thing was kind of emerging its head for like, what, the 5th time or whatever over the years. I had a nuke-proof reactor for 27.5-inch wheels front and rear, and I put a 29-inch wheel and 29-inch fork on the front. So as far as I remember, I switched to a fork with 20mm less travel, and that basically kept the front end the same height, but it made the bike look and feel strange because the tyre essentially was much closer to my leading foot. If you imagine, because you've put the bigger wheel in there. I kind of wanted to do it just to feel the lean angle and other stuff was like, and it didn't work too well on that option. But going the other way, I don't see why you couldn't do it. But what's wrong with it with the 29-inch front wheel? Surely that's beneficial. It's been designed with that in mind. Just careful you don't ruin your bike. Has anyone else taken a mullet style bike or even a 29-inch bike and converted it to smaller wheels? And how have you got on? Share the love down there. Let us know what you've done. Next up from Chris Rides MTB. The Roadies at Global Cycling Network are crazy about waxing their chains at the moment. I mean, if you just lose waxing their chains from that sentence, I think you get close to them. I'd love to see a deep dive, if that's of any use, just mocking by the way, on our mountain bikes or for the relatively clean road environment. So I've not done this, I've been asked about it many times. And actually before Christmas, I chatted to Lewis Lacey from the Muck-Off Chain Development laboratory, whatever you want to call it, and also to Bryn over at PT's, who's one of the product designers there. Now, both of them had positive things to say about waxing chains, but you've got to bear in mind that tends to be for a more specific environment, so drier conditions will fare better. Yes, technically wax will be good at repelling water, but not necessarily so in the horrible environment that we ride in off-road. So you could say it could be very good in terms of reducing friction and the application stuff. However, the negative point that both raised, and the fact that everyone else I've spoken to have, is about the application process. The fact you've got to remove your chain from your bike, you've got to split that joining link, which means, if you want to be safest about it, fit in a fresh one each time you do this. You've got to make sure everything is completely stripped out of the chain. The best way to do that is a hydrosonic cleaning bath as well. Like, it genuinely takes everything out of the chain, but that's another product as well. Of course, you can do it with heavy duty solvents. You've got to make sure that they're fully washed out, everything's fully dry before you wax that chain in the process. So yeah, I mean, the kind of nerd in me, it does appeal to try it, and I've been saying for ages, and maybe I will try it, I don't know. If I was going to try it, I'd probably use the Absolute Black graphene infused stuff, and I'd do it on my cross-country bike, because from give or take this time of year until autumn, it sees a lot more use on my other bikes, because it's my like after work bike, or you know, if I'm just going for a ride at the weekend, I just want to crank some miles, that's the one. And obviously the dry conditions, but given the fact that we ride in really mixed conditions in this country, it's just not the best approach, I don't think. I'm not muddying the idea, I'm sure it works great for some riders out there. Now, interestingly, with the PT's lubes, the dry lube, which as you can see I've barely used so far because I've been on the all conditions, mixed conditions lube. This one's actually a wax-based lube, but unlike many other dry lubes, so most dry lubes on the market tend to have a solvent as the carrier. This one actually has a water emulsion as a carrier, so you can fit more of the wax in it for the actual style lube it is. It does mean it takes a bit longer to dry up and set in place. but the idea is you get more wax into the chain, it penetrates into the chain and does its job. And that's pretty close, well, at least a convenient way of waxing your chain. Certainly the easiest option as far as that goes. I'll let you know how I'll get on with that. It's not been dusty as of yet. It feels like it's rained for about 6 months. So yeah, but I could be persuaded to do it. I'm not sure, I don't know. You've asked about it for a video and a few others, so maybe it's unfair of me to say that. Maybe we should just make the video. Okay, next up from Tulu. Can I replace 104 BCD chainring, I practice this one, without undoing the whole crank arm by removing the pedal, for instance? Well, it does depend on how close your chainring is to the bottom bracket and your sort of your whittling area, but yeah, I've done it before. I've done it quite a few times, in fact, over the years. What you want to do is shift your bike into the highest gear at the back, so smallest sprocket, turn the clutch off if you've got one, lock out the cage if you've got a SRAM cage with a cage lock on there, get your chain off, let it just dangle on the floor there carefully, undo your bolts, basically undo the pedals, or just the right hand pedal on there, and sort of wiggle it around the spider and then off, and then repeat by putting it back on. It won't always work if you haven't got the room to sort of play behind your BB because of pivots or whatever else on your bike. It just might not be possible. You might have to whip the crank off, but it's pretty easy to whip off cranks these days, so I'd probably just do that, to be honest. Next from Odom Photo. What's your best advice for chasing down creaks and squeaks? Something in the rear triangle on my bike is creaking. I've cleaned all the obvious things, but can't figure out what it is. I feel your pain. It's a witch hunt, this is. So you've basically just got to use process of elimination. So best advice would be to make sure your tyres are inflated to a sensible tyre pressure and go somewhere with the smoothest possible, sort of like an asphalt or a tarmac surface is good because there's no additional noises, like a disused car park or at least a quiet place where you're not going to be interrupted, because you want to hear the bike as well as making it safe for yourself. And you're going to need to try things seated and stood up, so under power and just pedaling, both seated and stood up. And then you can take out the equation things like the seat post, even pivots on the bike there, depending on if it's happening, if you're pedaling, if you're compressing, you're going to have to just work around. But there are some things on the back end of a bike. I did do a video about trying to find a creak on, I think it was one of my old nuke-proof reactor actually, found a creak on it, and it took me forever to find it, and it ended up being the little bearing cup that presses into the shock. The bearing was actually moving within the cup, not the cup moving within the shock. And it just took forever to find it. So I changed the bearings for fresh ones, and I just used a tiny drop of press fit retaining compound just to keep that bearing, just from like walking on the inside there. No creaks ever again. But that said, I've got another nuke-proof reactor and it's not happened on that one. So it might have just been a one-off or a dodgy bearing or something. So it could be your cassette body. So the actual carrier body that holds a cassette, could be that, the way it mounts onto the hub. Sometimes they just push on, other times they bolt on. So if there's a kind of an interface there, so take that off, give it a clean, put it back on. That could be something. Your rear axle assembly, whether you've got Maxell or Syntace or QR15 or whatever it is you have on the rear, look at all the components of it. Quite often on some bikes, the actual dropouts will bolt on, or at least the threaded side will have maybe 2 or 3 bolts that hold it in place on your frame. There's a flat interface there, and then of course it has your mech hanger on there. Now that can move, that can creak. I've had that creak loads of times. You've been like, what the heck is this? Chainring bolts or the chainring direct mount onto your crank, they can creak like a good one. Your bottom bracket can creak. Both types of bottom bracket, whether it's press fit or BSA threaded, they can creak as well. So that's worth having a look at that. Main pivot or shock bolts, spokes as well. Tends to be drive side spokes if they're, I've actually found, over tight. So if you've perhaps buckled your wheel or ended up having to have your rear wheel tension at any point, and you might find there's a couple of tight ones under pedaling, under torque, they can creak. I mean, there's loads of other things it could be. I'm sorry, I can't help you any more than that, but process of elimination, and it can drive you a bit potty trying to figure out what it is. Good luck. I sympathise with that. Next up from Genex F1. What's your opinion on One MTBs like the Hello Dave, and why don't they get much coverage on channels like GMBN? Well, for starters, there's no conspiracy theories, just I haven't really been asked about them, if I'm completely honest. I think On One bikes are great, and I've had a history of making really good bikes. So the Hello Dave, well, if I'm not mistaken, that's probably named after Papa Lazarou, like Hello Dave from the League of Gentlemen, which was a risky comedy, I guess you could say. I'm not sure if it's even aired anymore or if it would be, or if it would go down well, but it was funny and it's definitely the humour of those guys. Yeah, so that bicycle was 77 degree seat angle. This is it on screen. Wild 62 degree head angle on there. Aggressive hardtail. Looks wicked, I think. Very similar to what Kona did with their Honzo, their aggressive one. Hondo ESD, I think. And the Marin Bikes Elroy. Real good, progressive, hardcore hardtail. Like, don't compare it to a cross-country bike. It's not. This is a bike to winch and then hammer those descents, running a longer travel fork. All good. They also, like, they've had a history of like amusingly named bikes. So they had one called the Kaffenbach, and spelled, I think, with a K. And you saw the name, you're like, what is that? Some sort of like weird German spider or something. It's just a bizarre name. But they designed it to ride to the calf and back. Yeah, and they also had the retard. But it was REET, REET hyphen ARD, I think, and it meant because it was REET hard because they're northern. Good sense of humour. Little bit taboo subjects here and there they tackled, but yeah, good bikes, amazing value, I would say. So if anyone out there is wondering who On One bikes are, there's a little link in the description underneath. Check them out. Make great bikes. And that's the end of this week's Ask GMBN Tech. I'll be back on the show soon with Anna. Looking forward to it. Just getting back into the swing of things. Let us know what you think in the comments underneath, and we'll see you soon. Take care.